Let me get this out of the way first. I didn't like the concept of a roguelike. A game with procedurally generated levels and permadeath seems extremely cruel and unenjoyable. I consider myself to be a fairly diverse gamer in the things that I play, but the thought of a roguelike has always rubbed me the wrong way. So I shouldn't like Slay the Spire, which is a roguelike card-playing game. But with over 100 hours played, this game has become my gaming addiction. Slay the Spire is a game that is both frustrating and addicting at the same time. As with all roguelike games, the appeal of the game is trying to get just a little bit better the next time you play it. You see, when playing roguelikes, when you die in the game, that's it. Game over. You lose all your progress that you built up and you must make up for all the lost time back. And that's most definitely the frustrating part. The name itself comes from an old school game simply called Rogue. As it was common at the time, many games out of the early video game generations lacked proper saving capabilities, usually relying on passwords or, in the case of Rogue, nothing. So you get one shot to beat the game, and once you lose, that's it. You've lost everything. Now, I won't say I don't see the appeal. The idea that if I just did this one thing differently, I would have beaten it. Or maybe it's just a rush of getting incredibly lucky and blazing through the levels or enemies. So I understand why people want to play it, but that doesn't appeal to me. As I've grown as a gamer, games usually fall into one of three categories for me. Games to relax with, games to play with friends, and games to get lost in. And ironically enough, Slay the Spire falls into the category of games to relax with. With Xbox Game Pass, you always have an insane amount of content to play at any time. After getting my Xbox Series X and a 1TB expansion card, I was downloading away without a care in the world. One of the games that I downloaded on a whim was a game called Neoverse. It looked absolutely goofy, so I tried it out for a bit. Then I died and realized I was playing a roguelike. Either I wasn't paying attention or I didn't read it, but I felt annoyed. One of the things that makes roguelikes so unappealing to me is that you don't really get a chance to learn the mechanics, and when it just feels like you lose and the game is over. So I was a little annoyed at the game, and after describing the game to a friend of mine, he suggested me to try out a similar game called Slay the Spire. Me already not being invested in Neoverse, I wasn't hyped to play a similar game. But just like Neoverse, Slay the Spire was on Game Pass, so I downloaded it and gave it a try. So the first thing that stood out to me about Slay the Spire in comparison to Neoverse was the art design. Neoverse was going for an anime style with overly shiny 3D models that looked kind of dead. Slay the Spire instead was a stylized 2D game with an old school fantasy dungeon vibe to it. So I started the game with the first available character, the Ironclad, and I got destroyed immediately in the first act. But the game was oddly forgiving for what I thought a typical roguelike is. In between battles, I was restored health, and I could choose my path and avoid elite encounters if I planned it very well. And you were offered cards after every battle to build your deck. The game seemed very accessible, and you begin to learn some strategy in the game. How buff works and how stat effects work. The manipulation of strength and weaknesses, how shielding could save your life, etc. There was a lot of depth to the game, and the fact that you could get random card drops makes the game unique every time, while learning new strategies and ways to deal with your enemies. Not only do you get to try out new cards in each run, but you are actively working to unlock new cards through gained experience unlocks and relics, which greatly enhance or in some cases hinder your gameplay style, offering buffs to the player character and can completely change your strategy with a playthrough. The goal of each run is to make it to and defeat each boss in the 3 chapters. The game forces you to strategize. You can't brute force your way through every situation. There are enemies that focus on powering themselves up to make bigger attacks on you, or enemies that focus on building up defenses and shields to make it harder to damage them, or enemies that tries to debuff you to make you weaker as a player. Each enemy type comes with some unique perspective that you must conquer with your available toolset. And that's just with the Ironclad. There are 3 other characters as well that completely change up the gameplay. The Ironclad focuses on building up strength buffs to make himself a powerhouse, and his regenerative health is a great bonus. But the Silent is almost the complete opposite of Ironclad. The Silent focuses more on defenses and status effects. The Silent's overall health is much lower than Ironclad, and he doesn't regenerate health after each combat, meaning you must solely rely on rest stages to regain health. To compensate for this, a good number of the Silent's unique cards focuses on shielding to prevent damage, as well as some zero-cost cards which can deal free damage called shivs. But also his biggest advantage, which is Poison. Poison is a status effect that, when activated on an enemy, slowly saps away their health turn by turn. The catch is, however, the effectiveness of the potion lowers each turn, but Poison can be stacked, making it more deadly as time goes on if you continue to add Poison. This works extremely well for the Silent's gameplay because you can constantly focus on keeping your health guarded while inflicting constant chip damage with Poison and keeping yourself safe. Poison becomes outright broken with the Catalyst card, which doubles the effectiveness of Poison on an opponent or triple it when upgraded. You get 2 or 3 upgraded Catalyst cards and a ton of Poison afflicting cards, and the game becomes downright unfair to your opponents. The third playerful character is the Defect, whose gimmick is the manipulation of orbs. The Defect has 3 spots for orbs by default, and these orbs could either be used to attack, defend, or build up enhancements. The Lightning Orb attacks the enemy every turn that is active, giving you constant chip damage to your enemies. The Frost Orb gives you constant shielding, making you a defensive powerhouse. Dark Orbs build up power over time, and when activated, hits the enemy with the full amount of damage that has built up. Plasma gives the character more energy to play more cards in a single turn, and Focus makes your already orbs more effective and useful. As you play with the Defect, you will also unlock relics, cards, and potions to add more orb slots, increase the effectiveness of the orbs, and stack massive damage or massive buffs using the orbs. The Defect is probably my favorite character out of all of them. It is the one I've had the most success with. Lastly, there's the Watcher, which I admittedly haven't spent a lot of time with, which in itself is ironic given how much time I put into the game. The Watcher's gimmick is that she utilizes different stances to augment her playstyle. The Calm stance gives the player more energy when the Watcher leaves the stance. The Wrath stance doubles the player's damage output, but at the same time makes the player doubly vulnerable to enemy attacks. Lastly, there is the Divinity stance, which grants the players extra energy and triples her damage output, but only lasts for 1 turn. I think one of the underlying aspects of this game that makes it so addicting is the risk-reward nature of the whole game. Every move and decision you make is some type of consequence. You see this early in with the rest stops in the game. Usually very limited amount of rest stops are in each act, and here you have the choice of recovering some HP or upgrading a card, making it much more effective. Relics are another staple of decision making in this game. Some relics are net positive, but some give you a buff in exchange for your ability to gain coins, for example. Decision making is even in your path that you choose as you play through the acts. Do you want to take on elite bosses, which could destroy your HP, or even worse, end your run because of the heightened challenge? Maybe you want to take your chances on question mark stages, which could be of any assortment of random events that could be great for your run or game breaking. With this game, I realized the appeal of roguelikes. High risk, high reward, but not always. Sometimes high risk, low reward. Sometimes low risk, high reward. Every game gives you something different. The fact that sometimes you get a good set of randomized cards and sometimes you don't is the thing that keeps you reaching for more. Now earlier I said this game is relaxing for me. This is because of 2 things. It is a low impact game that can play while lying in bed or lying back, and it doesn't require any quick movements. But also this game has become a podcast game for me. So let me be clear, a game being a good thing to play while listening to a podcast is not a bad thing at all. A typical podcast is around an hour long, so at the very least I usually play this game for that length of time, and time just flies while I'm playing this game. I can easily lose hours and hours of time just going through the game and listening to several podcasts at a time, or play it while casually talking to friends on the phone. With 100 hours in, this game still makes me think, maybe I should play some more Slay the Spire. Thank you for watching. My name is Brian, and this has been My Gaming Addiction, a concept show on addicting video games on Sound Test.